The Fast Castle. Berlin has been arguing over the reconstructed castle on Schlossplatz for 40 years now. Finally, Sam Rose, the president of the European Federation, a long-time leader of the British Liminalist Party and first president with full executive powers in a unified European state, will inaugurate the new Jean-François Lyotard Forum at the heart of Berlin on November 9, 2029. More than a decade of failed attempts to create the so-called Humboldt-Forum, all cultural politics within a German context were rendered obsolete in the course of a swift political process of European unification. The always controversial Prussian facade, reconstructed by Franco Stella, was no longer an appropriate representation of the cultural ambassadorship that the European Cultural Council had devised for this location in Berlin. Finally, after a generation of conservative founders and architects of the late 20th century finally retired and a new generation of cultural activists entered the scene, cultural discourse very quickly evolved. In a rapidly transforming global culture and economic environment, a different notion of architecture was devised. No longer was there a need nor a reason for representative and restorative fake Baroque buildings like the Humboldt-Forum. Therefore, in 2019, the EAF, the European Armed Forces, were commissioned with the destruction of the former Humboldt-Forum in a rare opportunity of practicing urban combat at the heart of Berlin. After 2 years of military training, practically restoring the Schloss, as it was referred to a status quo ante, it almost appeared as just after the end of World War II, until in a reenactment of the GDR's demolition of the Prussian castle in 1950, Schlossplatz was again cleared of all remains. Instead of discussing the castle as a, quote, spiritual center of the nation, a new architectural contest focused on the challenges of a quickly evolving global cultural and economical metropolis that Berlin was fast becoming. From 1989, when the Berlin Wall fell, until 2009, Berlin had already exchanged 50% of its population. Now, 20 years later, in 2029, virtually all Berliners had arrived to the city just within the past decade, making Berlin the most culturally diverse city on the planet and unleashing an unprecedented cultural, economical, and political power. Old-fashioned sociological terms, as it turned out, of transformation, turned out not to be sufficient in describing such change. After 2 years of heated debate, it was Thomas Eller and his group of architects who suggested a different approach. Instead of building stages of transformation as a late postmodernist conception of architecture, he focused on the liminality of thresholds in a global cultural development. His radical idea of liminal architecture that is associated with ephemerality and transitional passages between alternative states captured best the fast-changing idea of Berlin as a global metropolis. Liminality in this architect's vision refers to transitional space, neither being of one place or another, rather a third space in between. What could better describe Berlin than that? In 2024, construction of the Fast Castle, designed by the architects group LA Liminal Architects, founded in 2010 by artist Thomas Eller, finally begun. He was also seminal in shifting the forum's focus from a 19th century concept of museum presentation towards a thorough research in the various manifestations of the inhuman that have developed culturally over time. It was also he who suggested Jean-François Lyotard as a namesake for a forum that probes into technocultural advances and their impact on everyday life in a globalized environment. We are very happy that on November 9, 2029, the Jean-François Lyotard Forum will commence to be part of public life. Please find more information on www.liminal-architecture.com.